So this is our first meeting back of the Semantic Heritage Research Data Group, which is a group that we initiated during the quarantine, and the sort of idea behind it was that everybody was suddenly forced into a full digital mode, and so this background problem of dealing with the digital in research in humanities in general and archaeology in particular suddenly became very foregrounded, and people were stuck in their caves anyhow, so why not think about a problem that was bothering you anyhow? So we sort of gathered together this group focused around the foreign schools, but also interested members of the heritage community in Greece. And we've been meeting since the spring, and we took a break in July. And our meetings so far have been sort of about defining this problem of what do we want to do with this group, and what is it to manage data, archaeological data, towards having it open and semantic, and what are the tools, what are the methods, what are the problems. We left with our final meeting before the summer break, and we decided to call on a series of speakers who are experts with either policy or tools or methods regarding semantic data tools, and archaeological data and heritage data in particular. And so I will just share my screen briefly, or doorbell's ringing. Let's see, Franco, oh, there you go, thanks. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Almost?
Yeah.
Okay. I went ahead and sent invites to speakers, and this is the agreed schedule. So all the way up to December, when I suppose we'll be looking to have a break again. We've got a full program of speakers talking on different aspects of the work that we're interested in doing. And so eventually I'd like to make this program into a nicer looking thing, so maybe it could be distributed at the foreign schools. But for now, just be aware that that's there, and that's the plan. And so normally the meetings we've been having have been working meetings, and we've been talking about the group and so on and so forth. I would suggest, because we now have a list of speakers, and we have Franco here with us today, that for this meeting, and starting from this meeting, we could just dive directly into the presentation of our speaker, and then have a discussion around what they presented. And I would vote that we could possibly have an in-person meeting with people who can't come in person, participating digitally at some point towards the end of September, start of October, to try to meet together to do all the discussion around finalizing the details of the definition of our group and how we're going to operate and that sort of thing. Does that sound amenable to everybody? Okay, so nobody seems to object. So with that bit of paperwork out of the way, I'm really happy that Professor Niccolucci has agreed to join us today and to present on this topic of open data in archaeology. Professor Niccolucci is head of the VAST Lab, which is a research institute that deals with cultural heritage data inter alia, and he himself and members of his team have been heavily involved in the development of the CDOC CRM standard for semantic data, the core standard and extensions to it. he, in addition to his research, has headed a number of European projects. I had the chance to work with him on the Parthenos project, which is a project looking at the integration of digital humanities data and creating new digital humanities methods. And one of the things that he's presently involved in is being the scientific coordinator of the ARIADNEplus project, a project in which at least one of our member organizations, the BSA, is already involved indirectly. So he's really wrestled both with the nuts and bolts of creating semantic data, but also the higher level questions of what it means to try to make open data and share data in the world of archaeology, where there are reasons, good and bad, not to share data. And so I'm really happy to have him introduce the topic to us today and hopefully open up an interesting discussion. So hopefully with that reasonable intro, thank you, Franco. I invite you to
start. Okay, yeah. So I'm very happy to be with you this morning. Good morning, everybody. Here is not I'm presently near Florence on the Tyrrhenian Sea, and it's not a very good morning because I came to the seaside, but the weather is raining. So it's a good thing that I have some interesting commitment as this one talking with you, and I hope it will be interesting. Unfortunately, we don't know each other. So possibly what I will say will be obvious for some of you. Other considerations will be maybe not so clear. I hope we have enough time for discussing the letter, and I apologize if I will deal with very initial matters. But of course, we have to start from the very beginning. And so let's start with, okay, sharing the screen. Just a moment. Okay, here we are. So, open data in archaeology. I hope it is the right one. Yes. But of course, everybody now speaks about open data because there is a strong pressure, social pressure, political pressure for opening all research data, not only in archaeology, and for access and reuse. There are documents by the G8 group. The European Commission has issued decisions about this. Also, the USA is coming up this issue of sharing and opening research data. And the main reasons are that openness guarantees accountability and transparency, not just showing the conclusions, but enabling to reconstruct, at least in theory, all the process from observations to conclusions. There are savings in money. There have been some estimates, which of course are all estimates are maybe discussed, but they show that there is a big saving if data can be used more than one time, and also they reduce double work, so they shorten the time in research to reach conclusions. So most of the funders, including the European Union and several European governments, are enforcing data openness. Apart from this global pressure and decisions to open data, there is a strong pressure by the academic community, which eventually ended in the formulation of the so-called fair data principles. I will spend a few minutes on them. And what about archaeology? Well, I like to always to start when I speak about data with a quote about sharing information in archaeology, which dates back to about 200 years ago. Of course, in those times there were no digital data, but it was clear that uh, cooperation should be very strong, and communicating and sharing with each other discoveries and knowledge, in those time written on paper, today written in bits, was key to advance research. At present, there is a continuously increasing production of digital data, but often when after use they are disposed of, because only the conclusions of the research are relevant for researchers. There is no lack. There is a lack of interest in preservation and of the data, and so they quickly degrade. And that the data produced by research are usually understandable only by the owners, by the authors, and so the use is impossible because nobody knows what those data mean. This damages the research capacity of archaeologists and undermine the scientific credibility, because only when it is impossible to go back to the chain of inference that produced the conclusion of the research. So it is quite accepted that the rules for data must be built in at the time of their creation, not afterwards, because it would be difficult to do so and include conservation, preservation, and the capacity of reusing those data once the research has ended. All these considerations on openness led some years ago to the formulation of the well-known FAIR data principles, where FAIR is a cute acronym for printable, fundable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So let me spend a couple of minutes on recalling what this means. And F stands for findability. So the first step in using data is obviously to find them. They should be easy to find for humans, but also for computers. So metadata should be machine actionable for automatic discovery of data sets and services. Here, I will not go into the details of these points. They specify the implementation of each principle. In this case, they focus on metadata, which must be rich, clear, include the identifier of the data they describe, and somehow registered in a searchable resource, a sort of catalog. Otherwise, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to find the data. Accessibility means that it must be possible to know how to access them. This possibly includes authentication and authorization. The key statement here is that accessibility does not mean open access. It means that data should be as open as possible and as closed as necessary. And again, the stress is on metadata, which should be receivable and accessible even when the data are no longer available. This is a common situation. Metadata should be, in practice, very much open, and the data may be protected if necessary, and also restricted to some categories of reusers. Sorry, it is very rare that you need some data alone. Usually, reuse implies mix and match. So there is the need of integration of data with other data. And you must be able to reprocess them, analyze, storage, and in general, interoperate those data with others or other data or other processing tools. Again, the stress is on metadata. The metadata should be explained in a broad language for knowledge representation, so they should follow some conceptual models which are broadly shared. Also, the terms used should be taken from shared vocabularies, and also the vocabularies should follow the FAIR principles. And they should include reference to other metadata, so to enable linking to them. Last but not least, of course, all these principles aim at enabling the use of data in an optimal way. So it is necessary that metadata are rich enough to describe at best the data. They may be it should be possible to combine them in different settings and replicate them. And the stress is also again on metadata, but it is also clear that such metadata should comply with community standards. So there must be an agreement in the community for setting up such metadata and express them in a coherent conceptual model. Okay, but stating those principles is not enough, because it is necessary to understand the people involved, the actors involved in their application. Of course, the first grouping that comes to one's mind includes repository managers. So the management of repositories must include a set of standards for metadata and thesauri. Aggregators, so institutions which aggregate repositories must implement the principles for accessibility. There must be also a consensus in the community, and this consensus should be expressed by associations and well, what we can describe as professional societies, groupings. For example, in Europe, the European Association of Archaeologists, or other groupings in charge of stating professional rules and therefore ethics, which should include the implementation of the FAIR principles. We all know that academic research ends up with publication. The goal is publish, and there is this famous statement, publish or perish. So publishers should support the publication also of datasets. Okay, all these things create the conditions, repositories and aggregators favor, support, access. Professional association recommend to be fair, and publishers also support the publication of data. And this could be called the carrot, but there is also the stick. So funders, authorizing agencies should enforce requirements about digital data collected in projects they fund or authorize. For example, the European Commission has stated that all EU-funded projects should apply some rules, and it is hoped that in the future they will ask for the implementation of the fair principle. In other cases, research projects need an authorization by public authorities. For example, in Italy, you cannot carry out any archaeological investigation without the authorization of the Ministry of Cultural Assets. And in this case, it should be also clarified what happens with the data. The data creators, for example, researchers, need to build data management procedures that comply with the FAIR principles. They should deposit data in repositories which also complies with the FAIR principles. And all this should be documented in the so-called data management plan. That is a document which specifies how the data were collected, what they are about, what is their structure, which standard they follow, and so on. By the way, this is not just a bureaucratic obligation. So it's not just you have to fill another sheet of paper where you write all those things. It is key to reuse, because this document is the door to access and potentially reuse such data. Since it is as all documentation, it is tedious to fill. And researchers aim at obtaining results, not filling documents. The group from Ariadne is trying to facilitate the compilation of the data management plan as much as possible, creating a template, an online template for archaeology, where most of the specifications which are required need only a click on some box, so you don't have to write too much. And above all, the document is machine readable. That is, the information is stored in a way that also computers can read and process it. So that, for example, search engines may directly go to the data management plans and extract the relevant information. Institutions managing heritage should make their data fair. This is a big issue, as you all know, because there is always a friction, a resistance by heritage managers. In Italy, the government, also in Greece, I believe. In other countries, there are independent agencies in charge of this. So it's not directly a ministry, but it's a different body, a public body, of course. For example, in the Netherlands, there is what they call Heritage Agency, National Heritage Agency. As you all know, in UK, it is in charge of a number of agencies, mainly by Historic England and so on. So there should be a support and fostering the production of fair data. This, I put it in the list because it is important, but I think that it should be better placed in a dream list, because heritage managing institutions are usually are not very happy with making their data fair, with different reasons, some more reasonable, some completely wrong, but there should be strong action by the archaeological community, making pressure on politicians and governments to enforce the openness of the data produced by heritage managers. Last but not least, new generations should be taught to understand the basic principles of data science in archaeology, including the use of the FAIR principles. Well, so that pertains to an ideal world where everything works and everybody's happy. But there is a lot of issues concerning the achievement of the ideal state of complete fairness. So this is a short list. Maybe there are more. I will also point out a few others in the next few slides. The first one is source fragmentation. Every researcher, every institution produces their own data set. And even if this is online, you have thousands, perhaps millions, more likely millions of data sets around, possibly accessible online, but sparse and fragmented as a whole. Metadata are not always in good conditions. They do often don't comply with the previous requirements. There are errors or inconsistencies in data problems, not because the producer, the creator, did not care, but because making mistakes is in the human nature. So there may be errors which were not discovered. Data quality is not certified. So if you find an online repository, there is no way of knowing the quality of those data, if they were produced in a correct way, following the correct procedures, and so on. At present, the only way to assess the quality of a data set resides in the reputation of the producer. So if something is produced by a reputable institution or by a well-known researcher, well, you may reasonably trust in those data. If something produced by an unknown researcher or by conditions which are not clear enough, probably the trustworthiness of those data is less guaranteed. There is an issue concerning interoperability. There is a lack of standards, and controlled vocabularies are not always available. There is an effort of creating a sort of standard vocabulary. For example, in Ariadne, we use the Getty vocabularies for that, but it's not always sure that words or terms have the same meaning. Not only because there is no agreement, but also because there are terms which are inherently different in different countries. A first example concerns gazetteers. the place names are not always the same. But that's easier. The biggest issue is with the named time periods. So when I talk about this, I make a joke. A merchant on a ship traveling from Gaul, current modern France, to Britain in the beginning of the first century also traveled in time. Before, of course, Britain was conquered by the Romans, so maybe let's say 50 AD. Because he moved from the Roman period to the Iron Age period. Of course, this is a joke. But it is a fact that when some name period definitions assume different meaning according to the place where they are applied. So again, there is a need of organizing these kind of things. There are projects, for example, in Ariadne, we adopt Periodo, which is a system for organizing name periods and convert them as much as possible to time spans with years, numeric years, of course, keeping into account all the approximation and the fuzziness of such time spans. Moving to the next one, software used to create managed data. Usually in good repositories, it's recommended to save data in formats allowing long-term preservation. So text should be in some easy to preserve formats, as present TXT or PDF. I remember that some years ago I had to do some archaeology of data because a number of reports, archaeological reports, had been written using a software which was no more maintained. In one case, there was a whole database made with some Macintosh software, and so we had to pay to extract the data from that and turn them into an XML format. There is an issue of access control for sensitive data, both sensitive both for the issues concerning safety. Typically, archaeological sites which are not yet well preserved or supervised by which there could be illegal excavations. The big issue, for example, is for underwater sites. Data ownership, which I would put together with credit citation. If you reuse data, how do you correctly cite the original producer of the data? And last, and perhaps less important, if you don't organize well the budget of your project, you may arrive to the end of the project with no money enough to safely store the data according to the FAIR principles. So, it's been long. I will run on the last slides. Fragmentation of data repositories, you remember, was the first issue. This can be managed by aggregating them. This is what we are doing in Ariadne, and we still keep this name, although the project is continuing with the name of ARIADNEplus. You can see here the homepage of the project with a lot of more explanation. In time, we created a searchable catalog of about 2 million datasets, including reports, databases, scientific data, and so on. The most diverse set of formats and content. The goal is to provide to researchers a one-stop access point for archaeological data and a virtual research environment that is a place where you can access data, reprocess them with advanced services. For example, extracting information from text files, processing images and so on with advanced tools, and in the end produce new information from this reuse. This is the portal, and I will not go into the details. You can access and play with it. We are redesigning it, and the new design will be ready in a couple of months. The project covers most of Europe. Dark areas are well covered. Clear ones are less well covered. And we have also coverage for Israel, USA, and Japan, with the most important initiatives in those parts of the world. The project covers different topics within archaeology. As regards space, we already saw that almost all of Europe and abroad is covered. As regards time, it goes from paleoanthropology to contemporary age. And it regards science, it is scientific analysis, it includes or aims to include almost all the techniques used in archaeological science. And now, last slide. Okay, so ARIADNE solves the problem? No, not at all. It may help, but you will also find that this availability, large availability of digital data is also creating problems. Because the increasing quantity of work published and available is overwhelming, and it is difficult to manage all of them. There are more new results than one researcher can manage. This happened already 20 years ago. It was again stated in time recently. It's interesting that the statement, too much data is just as bad as no data, because archaeological data have particular features, which you well know. I don't need to explain this, but they are very diverse, intrinsically diverse, I would say. Semantics may of course help, but you have a chair which is much more expert in semantics than I am, so the works of this grouping will of course be going to the details, so I will skip other considerations. The only one is that archaeological records should support machine actionability, that is automatic processing of content, as much as possible. Not because machines are more intelligent than humans, but because the amount of data, already 2 million datasets are very many, but these are only the tip of the iceberg of archaeological data. The quantity should be managed, and discovery should be helped by modern computer services. But beware of big data. There are no shortcuts. So I do not believe in those that say, okay, we can use big data, artificial intelligence, and so on to produce archaeological results. Without naming the sinners, but only describing the sin, some time ago and still today, there is people saying that artificial intelligence can reconstruct the past. So you put a bunch of documents, texts, maps, finds, whatever, into a crusher, into a machine, and at the end you get the past reconstructed. It is not a simplification. This is how they state this story. And there are 2 or 3 large projects still ongoing. I don't know with which results. This chain completely in charge of a machine does not work at all. Not only because there is no reason because it should work, but because if you put in sequence different computer tools, the errors add, not only add, they multiply. So you can use distinct, excellent computer tools, but the sequence is completely crazy. Instead, if you use computer tools, it may help in, for example, in pattern recognition of images, in 3D shape recognition. This is what happens when you use Google and you search for an image and you find many mistakes, but also some good results. Text mining. It should be improved to recognize not only single concepts, but also how they relate to each other. That is how the argumentation is managed. So beware, pay attention, but do not refuse technology. However, I'm convinced that innovation is not technological innovation. Innovation is people. Not so many archaeologists are involved. Maybe optimistically 3,000, but there are 60,000 in Europe. So it's only 5%. There are other stakeholders, managers, professionals, and why not interested public. Archaeology relies on a mixture of research, management, communication, and preservation. So there should be a strong effort by institutions and projects to support training, knowledge transfer, awareness raising, like the group you have formed voluntarily, because data science, unfortunately, is managed by data scientists. And data scientists often do not know the specific needs of the discipline and of the community. So, paraphrasing a famous statement, data science is too important to be left to computer technologists. I think this is the last one. So thank you very much. I must quote some colleagues who gave me inspiration. They're duly listed here. And of course, the European Commission, who paid for most of the work, which is behind this presentation.
Thank you, Franco.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the talk. I think I'll just open it up immediately if anybody wants to jump in with a question or a comment, or either about open data or about ARIADNEplus or any of the relevant things.
Well,
if not,
I must say that I was very impressed with the entire presentation, but the final point, the problem with data science being the fact that it's basically conducted by data scientists, usually having zero clues about the requirements of a particular discipline. I'm in love with that statement, and I will be maybe having it tattooed on my arm. Thank you very much, Professor.
Catherine, you have your mic open. Did you want to ask a question?
No, actually,
no? Okay.
I'm okay. I think.
I had a question. Go ahead, Frank.
To break the glass, I had not the time to do that, but I will send George in a few days also a bibliography on these topics. by archaeologists, by the way. So I will, if you then can share it. There is very little of what I presented comes from me. It is copied or drawn from people who knows better archaeology than me, because in the end I'm against data scientists, but my training is mathematics. So I respect the disciplinarity, and I will provide some references for papers you can usefully read if you want to go further into this.
Franco, this is Elton. Can you hear me clearly?
Perfectly.
Thank you very much for such. I think partly the silence is we're all digesting what you've been saying, particularly those last few slides. And I should preface what I'm going to ask by saying I'm not an archaeologist. So I feel a bit of an imposter here. But I wanted to ask you were talking, I think, very well about, to a certain extent, Ariadne's been really successful in getting all of these records together and producing this big data. Can you point to any examples of where research has been done and new research findings have been discovered because of the possibility of bringing together these data?
I can even do more. We have published a book with several reports of people from different countries who, with different accents, report about the use they made of the Ariadne aggregation, and it's downloadable. If you just give me a minute, I will post in the chat the link. Wait a moment. I have to open another window, but it's doable. Infrastructure. Otherwise, I can. Well, if I find it now, I will let you know. But otherwise, I can send you the information. Oof. It's a PDF. You don't know one PDF, but I don't want to waste your time. So let's go on. I will let you know the link to the PDF, which is about 200 pages book with some 15 to 20 examples. Of course, some papers do not go into real examples. They make general considerations, but there are real examples of use.
I think it's a really on-point question, and I would like to follow it up, but I have another. I mean, the one question would be, this group here in a sci-fi scenario 20 years from now, could be the nucleus of the creating a space where, currently all these institutions operate separately with regard to the data for very obvious and good reasons. But eventually, if there is a broader, societal initiative from the EU and so on to put in the legal framework and the necessary carrots and sticks that you mentioned, groups like this could create the eventual path to the ability for projects and archaeological data to also go beyond their institutional walls and be interacting and enable new types of research. But because that doesn't exist, because that framework doesn't exist now, I'm not even sure if those sorts of the kinds of research questions that you would ask, could ask, are being asked. So is ARIADNEplus as such, is that a sort of, is there any effort to connect to research institutes or universities or whatever to try to think of developing research that would work particularly off of the fact that you do have integrated data sets that you could do this sort of research over. So yeah, I don't know if that has that been
can you summarize your question in a short?
So the summary is, I don't think currently archaeologists would naturally think, oh, I should go to a repository and see what data that is already there relative to my topic, because you're going to go and create new data on the dig that you're working on. And if there is any data, you probably already know the data owner. So you're probably not going to ARIADNEplus to get, you know, a collection of 7 different archaic sites. I don't know. But it is because you couldn't do that before anyhow. So the question is there any connection to universities, you know, particular departments to develop these sorts of new kinds of questions that you might ask out of integrated, interoperable data sets?
Well, there is. We have a couple of research projects submitted now. One concerns migrations. But the thing is not so, that doesn't have yet a big impact. First, because it is work in progress. So we are aware that the data we aggregate are only a small part of all the data which are around. So apart from examples, by the way, if I find the chat here, I will put the link to the book. So first of all, it's we are still in the infancy of this thing. We expect the first real results to come, well, maybe in 1 or 2 years. That's the first point. The second thing is that we are at present more focused into setting up a tool which we think will be useful. We are convinced it will be useful, than to use it. Of course, we keep into account user needs, so the requests coming from the archaeological community. If you navigate in the ARIADNE site, you will find a survey which was carried out some months ago, and the answers of the people interviewed. As it happens, this is not, unfortunately, it's not so relevant, because all interested people answer to such surveys. Those who are not interested don't answer. There is a lack of convincement. Perhaps my last slide was significant in this regard, because the fraction, the percentage of archaeologists who are who hope that this is useful is a very small fraction of all the archaeological work. But having worked in this domain for more than 20 years, I have noticed that this percentage is increasing. So we have some activity to discuss with archaeologists how our work could be useful to their research. Well, some means a lot. Probably we should enlarge this discussion, well, to get some insight into what is needed, but we believe that we have asked enough. So we have enough understanding of what might be useful, but also to collect suggestions, proposals. Some time ago, I prepared the proposal concerning understanding the patterns of ancient migrations in Europe. and comparing. Of course, migrations is a very complicated topic. So we wanted to make a sort of demonstration and to compare the Viking invasion of UK, to analyze with a similar approach the movement of the sea people in the central and eastern Mediterranean. Very different phenomena, very different periods, probably very different reasons as well. And for this, we aimed at using and collecting and comparing a lot of data. This could be a real example, not just a simple exercise, as probably are those mentioned in our impact book. The evaluators said they didn't understand. So they didn't understand why it was important to collect and compare all the data relevant from different sources. So there are many papers on the sea people phenomenon, and analyzing those which are difficult to manage. There are of course experts, and in our team there were 3 very famous archaeologists working on this subject, and they agreed that comparing digital data coming from different studies, some more focused on destination or places where it was sure that the sea people had stopped for some times, most notably some Greek islands, I believe Crete, if I'm not wrong, Cyprus, and then Palestine. But this should be compared also with other information coming from other places. For example, Sardinia, because there are theories and there are hints that some of them could come from there. And this should compare very many data coming from ceramics, but also probably, because we didn't do the project then, coming from analysis on the cemeteries. So, for example, strontium isotope analysis to understand if these were movement or if this was a real migration and where they stopped and for how long and so on. This is an example of something that could be done. Has it already been done? No. No, because it's not, well, I don't know, because we probably represented it poorly, probably we didn't show it in a convincing way, probably because the people who were listening did not understand what we tried to explain, our fault, maybe also their fault. So in the end, it's like creating a car. The best people who created the car didn't use it to go on holidays in the summer. They just well, even better. The Wright brothers. They made an airplane that flew only for I believe a few meters, but after less than a century, airplanes were flying around all the world. So you must believe in what you are doing, and there is a possibility also for understanding from the beginning if this is something useful.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, exactly. I guess I was asking for the end point that we'd like to get to, but there, or on end point, but there's a lot of stops along the way. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today, Franco. We're within the space of our hour, so I think we'll have to close in a sec. But I just want to thank you again for coming and talking to us, and I will definitely pass on the links that you mentioned in the weeks to come.
I just copied it into the chat, so everybody can go there. There is a page and a link to the PDF document, which is freely downloadable.
Okay. We have our next speaker in 2 weeks' time with us, Elton from the Pelagios Network, inter alia, who'll be talking about Recogito. So we're really looking forward to that. And I think in the interim, I'll send around an email, probably with a doodle, for talking about setting up an organizational meeting where we can specify further how SHeRD itself will operate.